Hey everybody, I think that we're live on the page. Alexis, will you let me know when you see the video pop up?
I don't know that one.
Yes. It's on.
Thank you. All right, guys, so I'm so sorry for the time change tonight. I just needed to push it back just a little bit tonight. But you see that what I'm working on here tonight, let's welcome in March with a little four-leaf clover shamrock painting. So it's not going to be like a real lengthy tutorial, but I think that's what I love about watercolor is that you can create something really amazing without spending a whole lot of time. So welcome in, guys. I just do want to let you guys know I have been releasing a lot of my tutorials lately over. Hi, guys. Thanks for coming in. Hey. I've been releasing slowly over the last week or so a lot of my tutorials. I just really am so passionate about getting everyone to pick up a brush because I just believe in the benefits of painting so much. I know that might sound a little bit corny, but it is absolutely the truth. So if you do not follow me yet, please go over and follow me on YouTube. And it's at Kimberly Sminky. So that's the only place, the only social that I don't go by Lolly Doodle Studios. And Alexis will let the dog out because just like clockwork, as soon as we go live, he barks. So let me let her get him out. How is everybody on this first day of March? January seemed like it was 3 years long. February flew by. Absolutely crazy. So I just have a 5x7 here with a little 4-leaf clover drawn, sketched out very lightly. I hope you can see it. This is going to be kind of like a simple painting, but we'll work on layering color. So I think that we're going to keep it simple, and the colors we're going to work with tonight are Davies Gray, Sap Green, a little bit of the Cad Yellow, and a tiny touch of Burnt Umber. So 1, 2, 3, 4 colors. We really could eliminate 1 or 2 of those colors, but just in case, those are the colors that I think that I am going to use for tonight. And I have all of those colors right here in my palette. So I'm just going to start by, oh, I just got red all over it. Goodness gracious. So I am just going to activate my watercolor. We know with watercolor, especially if it's tube paint, well, all watercolor really. The tube paint, you square it out and you put in your little palette and you let it dry. And you might think, oh my gosh, because if you were using acrylic, you'd be done for. But what I love about watercolor is that just a few drops of water will reactivate that color. So this is my gray, my sap green, the yellow, and the brown. So I'm just putting some water in there to get them activated, and you can see that I've started to use them over here. So guys, I just love to work a wet on wet technique, so we'll just get right started here. So the shamrock is sketched out. It's like a series of little hearts, 4 little hearts. And I'm just going to fill in 2. I'm going to work at 2 of these hearts at a time. Or actually, we could do all 4 with the beginning color. But I'm just going to do 2. So I'm just going to fill it in. This is just plain water. And I'm wetting my paper. Everything that I'm using tonight can be found linked in my Amazon store. That link is in the description, and it'll pop up randomly in the comments section. So I've just wet my paper. The trick with watercolor is just to really play and find out, you know, what's too much color and what's not enough color. So I'm going to grab some of this sap green, and I'm going to work out of this well right here. I'm going to put some of the color in there. I don't know what that is. And I'm just going to add some fresh water. I want to work very, very lightly. And it's going to be almost like, let's see, we'll compare it to like dirty water. Like if my brush just still had a little bit of green left over into it. So I'm just going to lightly put some of that. And look, you can hardly see that, but I'm just going to wet that very lightly with my sap green, that lightest bit of color. And I'm just working really quick to fill that in. Then what I can do is come back over to my palette and maybe touch a little bit of more of that color on my brush. And I love to use the tip of my brush just to drop in some of that more pigmented color around the edge. So I'm just kind of working it around with the brush. I like it darker towards the edges than I do the center. And we're going to just come right over here into the other side of that second heart that we did. And we're going to do the same thing there because that water or the paper is still wet. You can see how that color just starts to kind of bloom. Water rushes to water, so the way the paint reacts to the water, and it will start to spread. I'm going to pull some more of that color through, just a bit. And I can come over and just take another little swipe of a little bit of a deeper bit of that color, and I'm just going to work that right here in the middle. I don't want to keep adding too much water, but right in the center, I'm going to really just dab some concentrated color. And I have not switched colors yet. All I've done is adjust the amount of water that's in my brush. What I am going to do now is just pick up a little bit of this yellow, and I'm going to mix it over here with my green. And see how that just makes it a little bit more vibrant? I don't want a whole lot of water on my brush, so I can just grab a paper towel or a tissue and kind of dab some of that off because my surface is still wet. So I'm going to pick one side of the shamrock, and I'm just going to work a little bit of that brighter green kind of in one side, and then maybe in this little hump of the other side of that little heart. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to drop some of that brighter yellowish green, and because the paper is still pretty wet, it's going to do all the really hard work for me. So we're going to leave that be just for a minute. I think the only thing that I do not have is my dryer. So bear with me just 1 second, guys. Let me grab that hair dryer and plug it in. That's one thing I just really love about working with watercolor. At first, you guys know, I mean, if you've been following me here for a little while, you know that I was really struggling with this whole watercolor thing back in the end of last year, well, all of last year, up until just recently. I feel like I'm finally getting the hang of it. And that's why I want to share it with you, because I know it can be intimidating, but the results are just amazing. Now, before I dry that, I'm going to take that brush again, and I'm going to dip right back into my sap green. I'm picking up really concentrated color now. I'm going to just dab a little bit more in the center, because now as the paper is still wet, but it's starting to dry, and you see I'm just tapping. I am just tapping that color. But because the paper, it's not saturated wet, but it is still a bit wet, and I'll just pull some of that up the edges. And maybe just a little bit out the center. I'm going to curve my lines to kind of give the shamrock a little bit of a direction on which way I want it to go. So I'm going to give that just a minute to kind of start to just let the water pull the paint and make it really soft. And then I'm going to hit it with the hairdryer. All right, so hold your ears. How is everyone? Are you enjoying the first day of March? Make sure we're in the screen. We are. So that's drying pretty quickly. So now, once we work on this leaf and this leaf in the same way, it just won't all become one green big blob. You will see the definition between the two. So just like we did with these two, I'm going to take some water, and that was too much, and I'm just going to wet the inside of this leaf. I'm working fairly quickly. Because I don't want my paper to dry out too much. So I'm just going to wet both sides of those leaves. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to come over here and pick up the sap green that's pretty diluted. And I'm just going to wash that color all through those two leaves that we just wet. Just going to try to stay in the lines, but if you keep your lines light enough, it won't matter. Part of having fun with art is going outside the lines. All right, so you can kind of see the difference there. Still pretty wet. I'm going to tap some of this off on my brush. I don't want to keep just adding more and more and more water, but I want to keep it wet. Okay, so I pulled a little bit of water off that time with my thirsty brush. Now I'm just going to come over, pick up some of that, a little bit more of concentrated sap green there. I'm just going to pick up some of that color, and I'm going to come in the middle here again, just like we did. I'm going to come around the edges of each of those petals, just kind of pulling the paint. Now, if you've noticed where you lift the brush up, it seems like that's where the water, the color actually just really starts to bloom out. So we'll get some more for this side. We're just going to follow the edge. Follow the edge. Just going to let the watercolor do what it does. Now, because this leaf and this leaf are sort of tucked behind the other leaves, remember I said we were going to play with adding some other color. So I just want the tiniest bit of my brown. So I can just work right off of that paint well right there with a little bit of the brown. I don't want a lot of this. So I'm just going to make sure my brush is not sopping wet with water because the paper is. So I'm going to take some of that brown. You can always build up the color, but you cannot take it off. So we're going to tap in some of that brown here in the center. I'm going to work it up the side of my Clover just a little bit there. But see how that gives it a nice little shadow. Now I'm cleaning my brush, plain water. I'm going to just tap it on my paper towel to get that extra water off. All this is now is water. I'm going to take that brush and just kind of set it on the painting. And I'm going to pull and kind of just dilute that brown out even more. I just want a little bit of that brown. So we're going to pull that color back a bit, move it around. I'm going to pull some right up the center, just like we did there. Then I'm going to come over here and grab some. Remember, we mixed the yellow in with our green. I'm just going to start adding a little bit of that. You can always grab a little bit of extra yellow, just to create some variation. And as long as your paper is still wet, the color will still continue to blend. Okay, just something on my paper there. So I'm just tapping that just a little bit. I don't want to overwork and work hard on my paper. Just tapping that a bit to get the color, to just kind of give the color a little boost. I am going to come in and deepen, get some of that straight up sap green, a little bit darker. And then I can come in here again, tap some up the center to kind of give the leaf. You can grab some of that gray, right? That was a little too much. So I dry my brush, and when I put it back on, it will suck up some of that color. As long as you get it when it's still wet, it will suck up the color. Okay, I'm going to grab just a little bit. I'm dipping back into that sap green, my favorite color green, honestly. And I'm just going to keep putting some of, I'm going to build my color. That's a little too much. Maybe. We'll work it around and see. Sometimes they're the happy little accidents, because I want these to look very dark in the center. So that's just sap green still on my brush. Now, since that's still wet, I can soften it. I'm just rinsing my brush with water, tapping it off. Nothing on the brush again except water. So when I lay the brush there and go over that really dark sap green, it will just help it kind of blend in to the paper just a bit. But the thing about watercolor is just giving up a little bit of control. I mean, you can only control what water does so much. So we're just going to keep little by little darkening these two leaves. See how that's really already taking a three-dimensional sort of shape. So I'm going to let that dry just a tiny bit, and I'm going to work on the outer edge of these two, because when watercolor dries, it dries lighter. So this got really light. This is just water on my brush, and I'm just washing that water right around the edges again of both of those, and I can work that down into those leaves a little bit. And I'm going to use more sap green, pretty concentrated. And we're just going to put we're going to drop a tiny little bit around the edges. So I'm just kind of tapping to let that paint come down off of my brush. You can work it by pressing the brush a bit. Don't be afraid to play with your brushes. Pull that color through. I am going to take a tiny bit of the Davies gray and go right along that outer edge. I'm going to leave it alone. This side, I'm just going to go in with the Davies gray. And I'm also going to, just a little bit in the center there, I want to darken that center just a bit. See how it's just kind of becoming almost three-dimensional? And it's easy, guys. But the Davies gray to me really already looks a little bit, it's got a green tint to it. So I just picked up some of my yellowish green, and I'm going to just tap that around this leaf just a bit, up into that gray. Can work it back and forth just a bit, and it will just start blending into each other. And really, honestly, that's really all. We'll let this dry just a bit, and we'll come in and play with that center. And we're just going to pull the stem right now. So I'm going to switch to a really small liner brush for watercolor, some water, and I'm just going to dip and pick up some of that sap green. I'm going to come out from the underside of the clover. And as I get to the bottom, I'm making it a bit thicker. You can make it as thick as you want, honestly. But I'm just pulling that color through, a bit thicker at the bottom. And then I am going to grab a tiny bit of my brown on the brush. And at the bottom, I'm going to drop some of that brown down there. Can work it up just a little bit. I'm going to leave it. I think maybe I'll just use my brush to pull it up just a bit. If your line gets wonky, you can fix it. Okay. So I'm going to hit this with the hairdryer real quick. That's the worst part of working with watercolor, is waiting for the paint to dry. Because if you go to layer different colors, as we've just been doing, it will just all become one big muddied mess. So I'll dry that. Let me see a show of hands, or throw me some hearts. Who thinks that they would feel confident enough to give this a try? And I also want to know is who would like the tracer that would accompany this painting, and that would be our March gift away. If you are on my email list, you will get the tracer for this in the next few days. So if you're not on my list, the email list, and you want to be, you can let me know in the comments. You can send me a private message and I can get you added. That way you'll get the tracer absolutely free. That is an offer only for people on my email list. So, with that said, let's finish drying. I think we're good. And we're almost done. We are almost done. We really are. I'm going to switch and use my little tiny liner brush. And we're just going to do just a tiny little bit of fine detail right here, just to really make each of these leaves kind of pop so that they don't look like one green bit. So I'm going to use some of my Davies gray, and I'm going to pick up some sap green, and I'm just mixing those two colors here in my well. And this is a size 10/0 liner brush. And I'm just going to come in here in the very center, tap a little bit of that color, and I'm just going to pull it. The very tip of my brush around, maybe a quarter of the way up. Maybe just a quarter of the way up each of those leaves. Okay, I'm just using the tip of the brush. You can pull some of that up the center. Now this one here, it's kind of bugging me, so we're going to darken that one just a tiny bit. I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of water. I don't even know if I need to do that. I'm going to dip into that gray, okay? So watch. I'm going to put that brush in the center. I'm just going to lay it down, and I am just going to darken this part. And you see how the brush is on its side? So I'm working from the outside to the center. You just want that to be pretty dark because it's tucked under these two top leaves. This is just plain water. Just working it just a little. I don't want to overwork the watercolor and really like rough up my paper, because that's really not what we were trying to go for there. All right. And then the one thing that I absolutely love to do with watercolor, I don't know about you guys, get this other brush, had a lot of red in it. I think we've got it out. So I've got the bigger brush. I've got my bigger size 12, a pretty good bit of water in there. And I'm just going to pick up some of that green right on that brush. Okay. You can use your finger. You can use another brush. Just hold it over the paper and tap, 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 tap. Right? Add some of those really pretty fun watercolor drops. Now, what the heck? I'm going to come in here and just pick up some brown with my green and maybe just a couple little more drops. And we're going to call it done. Let me know what you guys think of this. I hope you like it. Please like and follow. You can sprinkle this video out. If you are interested in not only watercolor, but acrylic, I will invite you yet again to come follow me over on YouTube. A lot of my tutorials will be posting there. That will be their new little home, a little happy place for you to come find them. So if you ever need any painting inspiration, you can find it there. And I love to offer with each of my tutorials the tracer. I know not everyone enjoys drawing, but they would like to give the painting a try. So if drawing is what's holding you back from trying, don't let that, because I'm also offering the patterns to go along with each of the paintings. And coming soon, you see how much paint we used tonight on here. Coming soon, you're also going to be able to get the exact paint that I use to paint the watercolors in a little sample card. So stay tuned to the channel, stay tuned to the page here to learn more about that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I can't wait. Oh, I hope you guys could see what I was doing. That got up a little bit high there. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will follow along. Come back next Wednesday for another little watercolor tutorial tip or a trick. I love you guys, and I will see you soon. Bye.